Welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben, and I have another video swapcast for you today. This is a really interesting one. It's been one that I've been looking forward to getting into for quite some time. We're going to take a close look at both the Karnak and Luxor temples in Upper Egypt. To my mind, these are a couple of the most enigmatic and interesting temples. They are just chock-a-block full of all sorts of evidence for ancient high technology, as well as just some astonishing remnants of what must have been just gargantuan single-piece statues and other granite objects. These sites were some major objectives for me in my recent trip to Egypt, which was late 2020. I had previously visited these sites, but I hadn't had the chance to film it. So we're going to take a bit of time to go through all of my footage, pretty much, from both Karnak and Luxor. As always, we're joined by Kyle and Russ, brothers of the Serpent. We also have another special guest with us for this one. Johanna James is going to join us. Johanna is an actress and a comedian based out of the UK. Johanna joined the trip to Egypt in late 2020. She was great fun to be with on the trip. So she also has some personal insights and experiences to relate from these temples. If you haven't seen her work, I'd highly recommend checking out her channel. There's all sorts of content there, but lately she's been making just some excellent videos in the ancient history space and exploring in particular some of the real mysteries and the evidence for ancient high technology. One thing to note about this swapcast was that I did kind of screw up and I forgot to record, or I had my microphone on mute in my recording software when we sat down and did it. Now, thankfully, Kyle and Russ, they recorded me over Zoom and I used their audio to patch this up. But unfortunately, the result is that my audio is a little bit out of sync with my video. You'll notice that it's fine for Kyle and Russ and for Johanna, but for me it's a little bit out of sync. I don't think it's a big problem, given that most of the time we're down as little icons in the screen. But that's pretty much going to be the case for this video, and that continues right up until I think like the last half hour of this, when I finally figured out that, I had the microphone on mute. I hope it doesn't tar the experience too much for anyone out there. I really enjoyed doing this podcast, and I really enjoyed going through and reviewing all of this footage with Johanna and Kyle and Russ, and I hope you enjoy it as well. I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers. All right, welcome back to the podcast. Really pleased to be here today. Joining me is the Snake Brothers once again. We're doing another video swapcast, and also have a special guest on for this one, Johanna James. Welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm supposed to talk now. Right, okay. Yeah, I joined, followed, tagged along with Ben on the Egypt trip, so I'm just going to jump in and I was basically a little sidekick for the whole time. Great.
Yes, it was awesome. We met in Egypt on the trip, and then you've also started just a great YouTube channel. I mean, you've always had a YouTube channel and a big following on some other platforms, Instagram and Facebook, but the video work that you've been doing lately has been taking off. You've been producing these great videos from that Egypt trip, but all of the tackling a lot of these topics in ancient history and all of the evidence for ancient high technology. So well done with that. I just wanted to say that. I really enjoy your videos. I think they're really fresh and a great perspective on all of these topics, and just a great addition to all of the other content creators that are making this. Well done.
Thank you. I didn't realise how much I filmed until I got back, and I was like, I'll make a vlog of the trip, and I was like, actually I'll make 9. Like, there's so much stuff that we saw and that we did.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad there's more people getting into this and thinking about it and producing good content. And, totally not jealous that you got to go on the trip. Not at all. I'm not jealous at all. Yep.
Well, I nearly didn't, because England they locked down, and I bought my ticket, and they shut the England, and they said that no international travel was allowed. So I literally had to go to like the Egyptian embassy and try and like brag it off as like a work trip, and was like, I need to go because I'm an official YouTuber. And they let me. They gave me like a visa, and I sort of literally snuck out the country. I felt like proper Indiana Jones. Like, yes.
That's perfect. Yes. Media. It's essential. That's right.
This is essential.
It was. I thought it was. Definitely.
Everyone that went there felt like it was essential travel. It was the end of 2020, like the whole trip. We were just about the only. I think we were the only tourist group, certainly with Americans, and I think English and Australian people. And everyone that was there was just, I think, very happy to be doing something at that point at the end of 2020. Yeah, out and about in Egypt together. So it was a really good group of people that were willing to take the risk. deal with the swings and roundabouts of fate and fortune as they happen, which they did on this trip.
Yeah.
Just it was challenging in a few places, but we got through it, and I think it was a great experience. I certainly thought it was just epic.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we watched you guys from afar. You know, the stuff you were putting up on social media, and it was cool to see how much you guys got to see. And of course, now we're seeing the results of it. So I think we should get into it. What are we looking at here? What's going on here?
Let me flip over so everyone can see it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so today we actually are going to look at a fair bit of footage from this trip, also some footage from previous trips, but I thought the topic that would be great to have, Johanny, because I know you got a lot out of these sites as well, was to take a look at some of the major temple sites in Egypt, particularly Karnak and Luxor temples. And these are just spectacular temples. I think they have a real mix of obvious dynastic work as well as what I would term kind of the older builder work with the obelisks and the giant statues and whatnot. Just remarkable sites. And I hadn't had the chance, I mean, I'd been there before, but I hadn't really filmed at them. So a lot of this footage is brand new as well, because I mean, this was the first chance I had to go kind of with the good camera gear and get to take a close look at these sites. So I'm kind of interested in going through this footage again myself, because I've only really been through it once or twice before this.
So is this is a model? Is this in a...
No, this is it.
Yeah,
It's
so it's the actual thing.
Yeah, people don't realize how small the dynastic Egyptians were.
Yeah. It's only a model.
Yes. I thought this was interesting, just a useful way to start it, because we'll start with Karnak. One of the biggest temple sites still standing, although as big as it is, there were others that were this size, if not larger, although there's not much left of them. Some square kilometers kind of scale. You've got places like Bat-Stet and Tanis, which were equally as big, if not bigger. But these are the ones that are kind of still standing in the upper Egypt, up on the Nile, what they call Upper Egypt. But yeah, so I thought this would be a good little just introduction to it. You sort of on the right-hand side of this is where we progress through and sort of the tour starts, and then we get into a few different areas on the trip. But I'll roll the video. We can talk about it as we go. But yeah, Karnak's one of the I would term just one of the more spectacular places, one of the places I was looking forward to the most to getting back to.
And what's the standard model, like dates given for beginning and end of construction for this place?
So it's typically, so things like the great hypo-style hall, which we'll see, they will say is, let me mute real quick, because there's some places we'll listen to the audio, but it's generally like the era of Ramses II, which I think is kind of the middle to late period. So they'll tell you like his father said he started it, and then it was like a hypo-style hall was completed by Ramses II. Same thing at Luxor, although you do have a lot of Old Kingdom objects here. So, and there's Old Kingdom writing even, like there's attributions to it that sort of suggest that this place its roots were far, far older. And I certainly think that's the case too. I think that once again you have this mix of dynastic work. So all of this stuff, and it was incredible work, like the hyper-style hall. I think a lot of the avenues of sphinxes, these buildings, these giant walls, all dynastic, probably all done in that period, that late period in Egypt. In fact, I do have an image, I think, that talks about the dating as they give it. But I think again it was built on top of what was left from previous constructions, and incorporated some of these previous things like obelisks and what were obviously 1,000-ton single-piece statues, things like the Ramesseum statue. And I know it's right at the end of this that we found a very interesting piece of a statue that was just mind-blowing to me. I'd never seen anything quite like it, and I think it may have been up there with some of the biggest ones in Egypt.
Oh yeah, the toe.
Yes, well, the thumb. This one was the thumb.
The thumb toe,
thumb.
same thing.
Yeah, and it's conglomerate too, which is crazy. Toe, thumb. Yep. Hand, toe. Foot,
It
thumb.
was some sort of part of a limb that was huge. That's
It
all
had a
we
big
can-
nail on it. Yes.
Yeah.
Big old nail. Yeah, so this is the entryway. So it's the same thing you see at Luxor too, which is kind of interesting in that there's this avenue of, I don't know if you officially call these sphinxes. These are ram-headed sphinxes. I think
Yeah.
these are rams. and these would go for kilometers. In fact, they have you have the same thing at it was supposedly at the Serapeum. We'll see the same thing at Luxor. And as they keep excavating and making roadworks in these areas, in Luxor, in the town, because that's the other part. Like, these temples are literally in the middle of the cities, like right on particularly Luxor's right in the middle of the city. It's right on the edge of the Nile, and they keep digging these up, and there's just like massive long avenues of these things.
You think they indicate Aries, right? Is the age of the processional age of Aries?
Could be, yeah. I don't know specifically what these rams indicate, or what they're supposedly attributed to. And this is actually interesting.
That's like 2200 BC.
Aries, yes. So the Moses essentially, yeah. So that period between up until about
it is with zero, like Pisces
until about 100 BC.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's Pisces. This is an interesting avenue. This is that front avenue. And I've got a clip, we might even skip to it right now and I'll come back. It's worth listening to of a previous trip here when I was here with Graham Hancock. And this is the avenue, so looking down here around the spring solstice, the sun sets directly on top of that pillar that you see right at the end there. And it works for 3 days around the solstice, but it's the whole thing's aligned to the solstice. In fact,
amazing.
Before you move it, but I have a construction question here. What are all those like rectangular notches up high? There's a line of them on the left and on the right. Yeah. Mounting things up there, possibly?
Probably would be my guess, yeah. So there may have been wooden construction here. This may have been decorated and hung with things. I think when we look at this today, you're lacking all of the colour that would have been here, particularly during the dynastic work. Yeah. And there's a few sections where you see that. Sorry, Daniel.
No, just saying you got to hang your clothes somewhere, right? So I'm just imagining.
Yeah, it's a good place to hang clothes.
Yeah. What were we saying about in Peru?
The giants.
Alante Tambo, we were talking about these clothesline, the nubbed clotheslines as well. That's probably what they were for.
Yeah, for sure.
It's practical, isn't it?
Moved on.
It is interesting too the way the joint there on the two sort of entryway. I don't know what to call them. They're like columns, but they're completely separate from the wall. Whereas you've got that brick.
Piece here.
Yeah, it's like an extension.
Yeah. It is. So that's definitely separated for some reason, if not just different building stages.
Yeah, it's added bigger, or the entrance was bigger, something.
Maybe, yeah, maybe this came later. It does, and because it does look like a different degree of work too, doesn't it? Like this looks like finer work.
Or maybe just newer.
Yeah.
Newer, yeah. Maybe less eroded. I think a lot of this is sandstone. I want to say it's certainly not like granite.
Yeah.
There's stacks of. Oh, hello, pup.
Sorry, I've got a little puppy here. Sorry, tried to give him treats to keep him quiet, but he wants to join in. So you can join in.
Welcome. Yeah, more the merrier.
This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Join the podcast.
Everyone, Egypt videos and Star Wars.
Yeah. I feel like I know we were only there for like 2 weeks, but I feel like I'm fully qualified to talk about different types of stone and timelines now. Like I can look at stuff and be like, yeah, this is definitely from an older period. I feel quite good about that now.
Good. Yes.
So I can see what you're saying. This thing here definitely was added later.
It's clear. I mean,
it's clear. Well, something happened. There's definitely a difference, right? Yeah. I think it's representative of the fact that there was lots of periods of building that happened at these sites, and when you look at them, you look kind of that. Let me skip to this real quick. I think here we go. Let me just grab this, and I will play the audio for this because you'll hear Graham Hancock talking about the that avenue that we were looking at.
The one that aligns with the sun.
At a great precision, so it's like you take a rifle and you point it, and the sun sits like the bead on the end of the rifle on that.
Did you witness that?
I have witnessed that, absolutely.
Did Cyprus visit that?
Oh yes, we never did my footsteps there. And it's the alignment actually works for about 3 days before the solstice and 3 days after. So from roughly the 2nd of December to the 27th or the 8th, you just get this magic that takes place. It's wonderful, wonderful. And that tells us these guys were just incredible. They were thinking big in a way that we've never experienced.
So it's a promise to come back then.
That's so impressive.
Good trip. Oh, and also I've got some images from here too. There's just so many more people were there a few years back.
Yeah, that's not how we saw it. We thought it was
No.
just ourselves. We had a private tour.
It was great that there was only a few of us there.
There's the thumb.
Yeah, we will get back. We'll get to the
thumb.
at the end of this. Yep. We'll keep the video rolling as we walk down into the hall. But it kind of starts with these really impressive, what they call hypo-style halls, which are these the columns that are made from rounds, and they're massive. This is the largest hypo-style hall in the world, as far as I know. I think it certainly has that claim. Luxor's pretty big too, but this was incredible work. And again, I think this is generally all work of the dynastics and Ramses and his father.
Yeah. That is enormous.
Well, yeah, this is just the entryway. Once we get to the actual these actual columns and pillars, the scale's kind of breathtaking.
So I see the pockmarks on the lower blocks there, like they're either damaged or they scraped something off there, or they were plastered, and then those look eroded.
Right. Yeah, I suspect there's probably been quite a bit of defacement.
Yeah.
If there was any carvings on this, and then people probably hammering at them. The funny thing is, up until not that long ago, I mean, there were people living in these sites like Karnak and Luxor. They were like essentially tent cities, and people were living in all of these structures. Like they were just piled up with just trash and just debris and like layers of dirt, and they had to excavate all of these. But people have been living here for a long time, and just in and around it. I'm sure using whatever they felt like they needed to use.
Right. Yeah, it's ready-made structures, so.
Yeah, definitely. I would too. Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad place to live.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's,
So are these columns made? I mean, they look like they're made of multiple blocks. Or
They are.
Yeah.
and plastered.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of modern repair going on here. So like those columns on the left here are modern, and then you have blocks like this, which I think some of this stuff is sort of clues that harkens back to older monuments that were here. This looks like white calcite to me.
Yeah. Exactly. Nicely cut.
Yeah.
That's mad.
About walking in here. Yeah, so and a lot of this stuff's been repaired, and again, I think all of these block works and even these columns, and you kind of get a little sense of the hypostyle hall ahead of us here. Definitely dynastic work, but then when it comes to some of these objects, the granite single-piece statues, I think these are the ones that may have been either moved around or built around.
So when you're there, did any of the guides or Yusuf or anybody talk about the meaning of the small person below the big statues? Like, what does that mean?
Oh, it was the wife, I think.
Yeah, I
So
have. Yeah, okay, I've heard that one.
it was a representation of the wife of, I don't know why she was small.
Because like all the, well, not all of them, but at least some of the ram statues, there's a person standing in front of their paws. So it's like there's some kind of meaning there. I've seen people say it means the soul. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't recall Yusuf saying that. To be honest, I was running around filming a lot and not doing a good job of listening to everything he had to say.
Yeah, Ben would be off.
Yeah.
Get to a site, Ben's off. He's doing a perimeter check.
Yeah,
I had some objectives to get to. I've just been to a few
Yeah.
of these places and I'd heard. But yeah, there was, I like this. This is like a granite graveyard. I think some giant pieces of obelisks. And again, you can see clearly hand-cut glyphs in a lot of these cases. This was probably attached with bronze. There was, you sort of see some of the green tinges in some of these. It's good work, but it's definitely hand-done work. I think obviously work done by the dynastics. And then they would, in a lot of cases, fill in some of these with metals, and obviously all the metals.
Yeah.
Right. And this looks like a piece of an obelisk to me, like one of the many, many obelisks. This would have been a forest of obelisks, of these giant obelisks. And the funny thing is too, like, so look at the height of it. This is like the width of it. This is pretty typical for the obelisks you find here. And this is something that'll happen in a video at some point, but there's that scene on the wall at Saqqara. There's a causeway at Saqqara, and then on the wall, they've got this picture of a boat with these obelisks on the deck, and there's like, see, this is how they transported the obelisks from the quarry at Aswan to all these places. Yeah. But the obelisks are like less than half the height of a standing person, and they're like maybe a fifth or a sixth the size of some of these. And it's a different kettle of fish trying to move one of these than those other things. But they take that one scene and they say, yes, see, they floated all these obelisks down on barges. But I mean, these are so much mightier than the little obelisks that are shown on that depiction at Saqqara that gets used as fingers into holes again. You got to do it.
I would not want to be on a boat that was taking one of these things down a river. No way.
Nope. It's a scaling problem, like you're saying, Ben. I think this is the same problem that is. I think he's getting serious there. I think this is the same problem with modern attempts to do certain things, like with this megalithic stuff. It's a scaling problem. They do it with a small block, and they'll say, "See, it can be done." Right. But moving heavy weights it doesn't scale up in a linear fashion. It's
my posture is awful. Stand up straight, girl. I remember what Yusuf was saying here. He was talking about, it was either this one or the one before. He was saying that there were literally two names that were on the same obelisk. Like one had written that, and they both claimed that they had made it. So it was proof that people were just tagging this thing. And it was more than likely that neither of them had actually made it.
That happened a lot. Let's see if I've got let's see if you can hear it again. This camera, man. I like the footage, but the microphone on it's awful. But maybe we can hear what he's saying here. Let me try.
But the steel is a hard steel. I mean, you cannot really
Not steel, in my opinion. Stone.
But stone, so you do this with stone,
I think the stone.
Beren is a stone. Corundum is a stone. Same like they did it with this one?
No.
No. Oh, I thought you said it wasn't. No. This is the result of a hand with the work. Yeah. And I know you said that. Yes.
Is all the work here hand? By hand? Is all of it?
The hieroglyphs though.
Here we find again, this is part of the statue as you can see, and here is the belt of knowledge.
Yeah, so he's
we added this.
Yeah, the objects themselves.
Right. So let me clarify what he's saying. So it's interesting. It's because it's a subtle point. There's a couple things, but when he was talking about the glyphs, the owl glyph here, like that was the question. Like Stefan was asking, like can you use a stone chisel to get this result by hand on granite? And you're saying yes, you can use corundum or flint or something that's harder than granite. And no doubt the dynastic Egyptians developed this capability. They were very good at it. And you can see that work. The difference is in some of the objects themselves. So it's those flat machined faces, it's the saw cuts, it's the other. You don't see the evidence for power tools or these advanced tools in the hieroglyphs themselves. And Yusuf, he's seen everything. He pretty much contends that he has not seen any of the glyphs, even the really good ones, which are absolutely beautiful, that represent sort of power tools or advanced tooling. So he thinks that all of those were done by hand, as opposed to the objects themselves, which then he spins around and points at a statue that has, a belt on it, but the belt doesn't have any names on it. Where, in most cases you see names written into these belts or on the statues. And again, a much cruder form of work compared to the object itself. So you see that a lot on a lot of these sites, and particularly on these giant megalithic blocks. That, it fits. To me, it fits that the idea that these were inherited objects that were then modified and written on later, and that became the writing, and everything became a high art form. And there's even some subtlety and nuance in a couple of objects and shapes and glyphs that I think may have been incorporated as original objects, and we'll get to that when we get to the luck.
Yo, what's up, Dick? How you doing, man? I'm really chill today. I'm really tired today. What's up, buddy? How you doing, man? What's up, my man? How you doing, buddy?
Giza Plateau, Egypt. The Great Pyramid is arguably the most enigmatic structure on the face of the Earth. It is the
I'm good, man. I'm good, buddy. Thanks, man. I don't know what I want to watch.
Yes, and I will mention, the sacred geometry course that's for sale on there is 10 years old and it was never finished. And that's one of the reasons, amongst others, why I've pretty much, we are now creating a new sacred geometry course that probably will not really be available till early summer.
Okay.
But it's gonna be kick-ass. That's all I was gonna say.
I feel like I think we've watched so much pyramid stuff, man. I don't know, I've got to learn about the Mayans. I don't know, man. I feel weird. Not weird, but like, I don't know, man. I'm just so chill today, man.
hidden beneath the vast canopy is a lost world of the ancient Maya. Nearly 2 million square miles of lush green hide centuries-old cities.
Time to go into the cosmos.
But today, lasers in the sky
True, buddy.
are helping to expose these secrets.
It's kind of like having X-ray vision and seeing beneath the canopy without having to touch a single leaf.
Archaeologists are using this new superpower to unearth treasures on the ground.
We are starting to get information from all kinds of places where we knew absolutely nothing.
It's changing our understanding of the Maya and helping to create a treasure map of Maya's lost world. Today, what escapes eyes on the ground is often clear to hundreds of more powerful eyes in the sky. New technologies are being applied to archaeology.
We can build our pyramid in
More
Mexico.
information than ever thought possible.
There won't be glaciers in Mexico.
2018 was an
Or
exciting year
Texas.
for the Maya.
Or like the Grand
Across
Canyon.
the Guatemala landscape, thousands
Not in the
of new
canyon,
ruins
but
were
like
popping
around
up.
there.
Once hidden structures are being revealed through satellites and
crazy,
a laser
man.
scanning technology called LiDAR.
One of the most exciting tools that we have in our hands that we're just beginning to use in the Amazon is LiDAR. LiDAR scanning lets us see through the forest canopy to what lies below.
LiDAR means light detection and ranging.
It works by firing streams of light pulses from an aircraft to the ground and timing the return of the pulse when it bounces
Nice,
back
man.
to the
Yo,
sensor.
GG's, buddy. That's
This
sick, buddy.
reconstructs shapes under the canopy, almost
Congrats,
like
man.
seeing with X-ray vision.
Every time that we have found a new set of tools, we get an insight into something that we've never imagined possible in Amazon. And I think LiDAR is one of these things that's going to completely change how we understand the landscape. The trees have always been what's kept us from understanding what's happening in the Amazon, and now we can see through them.
More than 800 square miles of the Maya Biosphere Reserve have been mapped to reveal massive feats of engineering for the very first time. Taken together, the images point to a far more sprawling and sophisticated society. Man-made structures appear, complex roads, temples, and palaces. Engineering like this would make today's city planners proud. So, what happened? How could such a great society fail? Could it have been war, religious cults and mass sacrifice, drought? Laser mapping is the latest tool used to help unlock mysteries of the ancient Maya world. For decades, archaeologists have pieced
Thanks, buddy.
together clues
I
from
got excited. I
ruins
saw
discovered
2
in
viewers.
old-fashioned
No,
way,
it's true.
on foot.
I get excited when I see you in here, man.
10 years ago, in the heart of
I appreciate it,
Mexico's
man.
Yucatan region, the ruins of a forgotten Maya town called Kiwik emerged from the jungle without the help of aerial LiDAR. In 800 AD, a local king ruled here and built an impressive pyramid shrine. 20,000 rocks, cut and stacked 30 feet high. The ancient Maya often placed royal tombs under pyramids. So on a hunch, archaeologist George Bay decides to sink a shaft straight through Kiwik's pyramid.
This building represents an artifact that provides us with information about the evolution of Maya society. By examining it, we hope to understand how Kiwik evolved. And after that, then we'll be through and we can
Bay has been working in the Yucatan for 3 decades, coaxing from the earth a snapshot of what life must have been like for the little-known Maya who lived here, called the Northern or Poop Maya.
Surprises. We have surprises.
21 feet into the hole, Bay and his team make an important find. Though to the untrained eye, it just looks like another piece of rubble.
Oh yeah, look at that. This is fantastic. This is a vault stone. And so for us, this is a very distinctive type of stone. Here's the face of it. This is the flat face. And this back part of it is cut like this, angled. And that would have stuck into the wall.
These special vault stones were not used to build pyramids, but to hold up the ceilings of buildings. Yet inexplicably, here is one deep in the pyramid. And when they dig under the base of the pyramid, they find something even more out of place. The foundation of an ancient building.
This full level, like this. This structure is completely new. It consists of several steps in a talud shape.
You have an idea of when this might date to?
400, 500.
Wow.
The pyramid dates to 800 AD. But analysis of pottery fragments confirms the foundation under the pyramid is 300 years older, dating to 500 AD. But that is an impossible date. To understand why requires a trip south, back to Guatemala, 600 BC, the earliest days of Maya civilization. Scholars always believed it was here, in a region called the Mirador Basin, that Maya civilization was born. Early kings razed the jungles and built monumental cities. Over the next 1,000 years, the Maya civilization became the most advanced in the Americas. They mastered mathematics and astronomy, perfected the first written language of the Western Hemisphere, and produced stunning works of art.
I think we
But
found
in
our documentary
700
day.
AD, there was a massive breakdown. War, political strife, and famine rocked the Maya world. Cities abandoned, and hordes of refugees escaped, fleeing north. As part of this wave, one refugee king sets down roots in Kiwik, founds the town, and soon after, builds a pyramid. At least, that's what scientists had always thought. Until now. With the discovery of the ancient building foundation, the dates don't add up. The foundation dates from 500 AD, but Maya refugees don't arrive here until at least 2 centuries later. Was someone already occupying Kiwik when the refugees arrived? 17 miles away, another discovery raises more questions. Its location is being kept a closely guarded secret for fear of looters. Few archaeologists have seen the discovery in person, including Fatima Tekpool. Getting to this discovery is no easy task. It's 230 feet underground in the bottom of a cave. The tunnel is narrow, and only one person can fit through at a time.
¿Será que puedas pasarme los guantes, Robert o quien sea?
Local residents knew about this cave for years, but had no inkling of the treasure hidden inside. Through a pitch-black maze of tunnels, they come to the remnants of a wall.
Here we have a restricted passageway. There was a wall here, marking an entrance that separated 2 areas, a public space and a sacred space.
Espacio sagrado.
As Fatima enters the sacred chamber, she notices something curious. It appears that countless torches and ritual fires once burned here. The Maya believed that caves were the dwelling place of gods. Maya priests made pilgrimage here on special religious holidays, consuming hallucinogenic plants to commune with the deities. The chamber is cluttered with broken pottery.
Here's an intentional deposit of ceramics where the Maya broke vessels as part of an offering.
Rompían la vasija y formaban parte de una ofrenda.
Scholars suspect that breaking ceramics released the power of the offering.
Rompían la vasija.
They would break the vessel and scatter it around the cave. There's almost always one piece missing. So we think that the Maya took one piece with them and perhaps buried it outside the cave.
The team pushes deeper into the cave. Maya priests relied on ropes made of vines to get here. But even with modern climbing gear, Fatima's journey still takes 3 hours. She finally reaches the cave's most sacred point and discovers an extraordinary underworld.
No way, come on. This isn't real. What, some shitty drawings?
Adorn the walls of the cave's burial tomb.
Interesting. Kind of lame, but interesting.
One image uses the contours of the cave to create a unique three-dimensional jaguar. Another portrays a mythical hunt with a ghost-like jaguar and deer.
What's striking about this painting
Wow,
is that the
look how big it
representations
is.
are not of living beings. They are in the underworld, in the world of death. Look at the body of the jaguar. It's skinny. It hasn't been well fed. And it has a deliberate mark in the middle. We think these marks represent illness. We think these marks represent illness. We think these marks represent illness.
Fatima has studied art in many Maya caves, but never has seen paintings like these. They are clearly Maya, but their unusual style suggests that whoever painted them was not part of the Maya civilization of the South. Stylistic analysis of the paintings and the ceramic offerings in the chamber indicate the murals were painted around 100 BC. That makes them among the oldest Maya paintings ever discovered in Mexico. The paintings date to the dawn of the Maya civilization. Scholars call it the pre-classic period. That was 800 years before the refugees from the south arrived in the Yucatan. So who painted these murals? Discoveries at another extraordinary new site may answer that question. Just outside the modern Yucatan city of Mérida, excavation for a new road network is unearthing scores of sites just by chance. 190 new Maya towns to date and counting. The map of the ancient Yucatan is shifting rapidly, exploding with previously unknown cities and towns.
We found that there's a lot more people, and a lot more agriculture, and a lot more happening here than we ever imagined, and at a much earlier date than we ever imagined. We thought there were just little hamlets out here. Now we'll have very complex towns, and we might even have urban centers. The whole idea of a much more complex society is emerging up here, and it's on the par, I think, with Guatemala.
We were walking right by these sites for decades without understanding them. It wasn't like we had to go dig for these places. They were right under our noses. We just weren't seeing them, which is amazing if you think about it.
George Bay and his team resumed their work in Kiwik, clearing stones from the side of the pyramid. They're doing detective work, trying to figure out why a vault stone, typically used to hold up the ceiling of a building, was found buried inside the pyramid. Another clue emerges, suggesting something is very different about this pyramid.
This is something the workers found, and they happened to, at the last second before they threw it away, they turned it over and noticed that, in fact, it's a piece of sculpture, a sculptured face. So here's the face with the nose and the upper part of the mouth. So then you have to ask yourself, what's this that's over this face? And what it is part of a large headdress and mask that this lord would have been wearing.
The ancient Maya often attached sculptures like this one to the facades of royal buildings. It's a watershed clue.
And those stairs were
Further excavation reveals the corner of a building.
This is the upper part of the preserved building, and this is what we call a broken molding. Over the doorway, this pile of rubble here is still filling the doorway. You can see remnants of the stucco here, probably modeled and painted.
As the team peels back the pyramid, a royal palace emerges. It consists of 3 buildings, a temple on one side, the royal family's residential quarters on the other, and a throne room in the middle. But why would the king of Kiwi build a pyramid on top of a palace?
The Maya like to see spaces as having power. It's not uncommon to see in many different forms the building of one building on top of another because sacred spaces, important places, are powerful. Our argument is that this is attempts to legitimize power.
George believes an early king of Kiwi, perhaps even the founder of the town's royal dynasty, built the palace. Centuries later, another king built the pyramid over his ancestor's home, making a direct connection to his ancestor's power, enhancing his own. The palace may be most remarkable for another reason. The king who built the pyramid was not a late transplant from the south, but a descendant of a royal family that had been in Kiwi for a very long time. It now seems clear that here in the Yucatan, there was a previously unknown Maya mega-society that was just as old and just as powerful as the South.
We don't really know where the cradle or genesis of Maya society is anymore. What we're learning is that there may have been multiple cradles.
Guatemala can no longer lay sole claim to the title birthplace of the Maya.
Have become more intelligent, have they? Why? What do you mean? I like their usernames. The usernames are usually pretty
Now
good.
that the existence of this northern mega society is confirmed, the questions
What do you mean, buddy?
rapidly multiply. Who were these lost Maya, and why were they forgotten?
Like Goose in their name.
Person
Wow.
who thinks about Maya sees these great monumental cities. What they don't
Interesting.
realize is that for every one of those cities, there are dozens of medium-sized towns.
Do you think
like
it's a
Kiwi
human
house
that
maybe 50,
put that
60,000
in, or do you think it's artificial intelligence
Tower near Kiwi,
associating
it's easier to make sense
the
of
genre
entire
with
site.
the name?
In Baysview, Kiwi
I watched
was
history
the
stuff in the vault. It's called
quintessential northern town.
Percy's.
You're
What?
actually looking at what
Get the
would have
fuck
been,
outta here.
downtown Kiwi, the
Percy's.
city of
Who's
Kiwi.
Percy's, man?
Where that small hill is.
Percy's.
That's the center of the city.
Percy's.
When Bay began his research, he
4-foot
believed the extent
Percy's.
of Kiwi was limited to the core area.
How do you know? How do you know so much about friggin'
But
ancient
LiDAR mapping later revealed a sprawling
English?
hilltop
Is
estate
Persia or
with a
Persia?
massive staircase across the valley, suggesting Kiwi might have been the hub of a much bigger complex.
That's jokes, man. Dude, you're starting
Every
to scare me,
morning,
buddy.
the
That's
excavation
strange,
team
man.
climbs the 200-foot hill.
That's jokes.
The ancient Maya would have come up that path, which would have led right
Hey,
to
man,
the spot.
I'm glad that the spammers understand this. You know
See,
what I
it's
mean?
basically a pile of rock.
I'm learning
But
from the
if you're
spammers.
standing here, 850 AD, what you'd be standing at the base of is an enormous
cool.
stairway, which would have taken you up to the top of what we think is the palace or the plantation house or the big house. Even the modern sense, a very palatial kind of construction.
They've
That's
dubbed
funny,
the
man.
site Stairway to Heaven.
place like Stairway to Heaven is amazing in the sense that they built a 9-10 room mansion up there. I mean, that's a very nice building, you know, a 9th century McMansion, okay, living up on top of that hill.
But who would have been rich enough and audacious enough to build such over-the-top real estate? Archaeologist Stephanie Sims is digging for answers, tearing up the floor of one of the 22 large stone buildings that make up the estate. Under the floor, a tantalizing clue.
Here I am sitting beneath the floor, level being right here, of a 3-room elite residence up on the hilltop. And here, just beneath the floor, are a few capstones covering a dedicatory offering.
The offering consists of a ceramic bowl and plate that appear to have been placed under the floor when the house was built.
It's a little suspicious that it would be odd to place a plate upside down like that without covering something, so.
Do I wear sunglasses outside? Sometimes. Why? Why?
Little teeny fragments of very badly decomposed, kind of eroded, degraded bone. Still can't tell yet whether it's human bone or animal bone, but my guess is human.
The large capstones flanking the offering may be hiding something else. It was common practice of the Maya to rebury the defleshed bones of their deceased ancestors. It's called secondary burial.
Oh, we are back.
We are back.
Secondary burials is that
We are back, and it
bringing
feels
bones
good. It
or
feels good to be
parts
back.
of family members to new locations to sanctify the
It feels good that you're here, man. And whomever else is here. Percy's.
The capstones under the floor of the house come off. A human tooth.
Confirming our suspicions, this is a human burial. This is a lower incisor right here.
There are several, and we're still waiting to uncover to see how many there are.
Though badly decomposed from the acidic soil, Stephanie can make out the remains of a human skull and arm and leg bones.
So this demonstrates to us that this offering is part of the burial underneath dedicating this house.
Back in the lab, Stephanie happily discovers that this skull's owner was not a daily brusher or flosser. Embedded in the teeth, 1,200-year-old plaque. Chemical analysis of food particles in the plaque gives Stephanie a hint about what kind of wealth Stairway's owners had.
I'm finding a much greater diversity of plant food items that were consumed, ingredients in stews and soups, squash, beans, tree fruits, chili peppers.
The bounty suggests that the people who lived at Stairway were major plantation owners, operating extensive farms in the valley below their hilltop estate. As George's team surveys nearby hills, it's clear that Stairway is not an isolated example, but one of dozens of estates. Indicators of widespread wealth start to emerge. Many secondary buildings at sites like Stairway, houses belonging to skilled workers like this one, are built of stone, a rarity in ancient Central America.
That's amazing. What it suggests is that we're not looking at a large peasant population that's under the hands of a very small royal elite, but that wealth and prosperity have spread over almost half of the population.
Kiwik may be evidence of America's very first middle class. Nearly a millennium before North America's colonial middle class.
These people might have had opportunities. They might have been able to acquire land. I mean, it's kind of fun to think about it, that they might have been living the Maya dream.
If there was such a thing as the Maya dream, this is where it happened. Kiwik and Stairway are nestled in a lush region of the Yucatan, called the Puc. Soil here is fertile, natural resources abundant. It looks like an ideal place for human habitation. Except for one thing.
The Puc region has no water sources. No rivers, lakes, streams, creeks. These people depended on controlling, collecting, and managing rainwater.
So how did they do it? Just a few hundred feet from the Stairway Estate House, archaeologist Bill Ringel has found an answer. Water falls heavily here, but only 6 months of the year. For the rest of the time, it dries out and virtually no rain falls.
And this was one of the primary adaptations of the Puc Maya to this rather waterless environment.
This underground cavern is actually a man-made cistern called a choltun. It was a work of sophisticated engineering, carved out of the limestone bedrock.
Over here we can see how these choltuns were constructed. First of all, they would bore through the harder caprock, and then once they got to this underlying softer marl, they would excavate out and make this large chamber. The last stage would be to cover it with stucco, and you can see the thickness of the stucco here, this pinkish material.
The stucco functioned as a waterproof lining. The Maya expertly engineered the patios, rooftops, and plazas.
It's hard to get I don't know, it was hard to get started today, but I feel so good now. I feel warm now.
Then drained it into 8 choltuns scattered throughout the estate. The entire hilltop functioned as a giant rain barrel. So how many people could this ingenious waterworks support? Bill Ringel and engineer Andrew Willis use an early version of LiDAR technology to map the choltun. The resulting 3D model allows them to calculate water capacity. Up to 10,000 gallons in each of the Stairway's choltuns provided a reliable source of water for the entire community. The typical family of 6 consumed 27 gallons a day. So Stairway's choltuns could have supported 7 families through 3 rainless months. These advanced waterworks formed a liquid foundation for life on Stairway, and for dozens of other wealthy kingdoms like Kiwik nearby. And sitting at the very top of that foundation was a royal elite. George Bay has found hints of their surprising wealth hidden in the jungle. The ruins of a majestic palace.
It represents a time in the history of the royal family of Kiwik when great amount of wealth was being accrued by the royal family, and they were expressing it through the construction of a massive new palace.
The king of Kiwik had built the pyramid over his old palace. So on the adjacent lot, he upgraded to deluxe new accommodations. The new palace boasted 15 major buildings and 2 ceremonial plazas. From previous finds, George knows the buildings were adorned in ornate sculpture and painted stucco.
This is one of the best preserved buildings in the new palace. You can see the remains of the stucco, but they would have been painted sometimes with elaborate murals. And then there would have been beams hung from certain parts of the roof for curtains or tapestries, and a variety of furniture would have found its way in here. Kings like things like jaguar skin sofas, fancy pillows. This simple room would have perhaps been quite luxurious.
By 800 AD, the northern Maya society is over 1,500 years old. Its people have mastered this harsh landscape. Their facility with water allows for large-scale farming and generates vast wealth for their kings, and even for a new middle class.
Imagine this place 800 AD. You would have seen the vast landscape of towns, villages, cities, the smoke rising from thousands of cooking fires as women prepared the evening meals, men coming back from their fields.
But along with this portrait of a prosperous society, Bay's colleagues, Bill Ringel and Tomas Gallardo, are finding evidence of a disturbing political trend on the rise. "20 miles from Kiwik is the majestic city of Uzma. In the 800s, it rose to become the powerful political capital of the region. Local kings, like the king of Kiwik, likely traveled here to conduct diplomacy and pay tribute to Uzma's royalty. Ringel wants to show Bay how these buildings underwent a peculiar modification in the 800s. An unmistakable new image was added to their facades.
What's really interesting is that little image right there, a feathered serpent. And actually there are two feathered serpents here, and they intertwine across the facade. You need visual image.
Ringel believes the serpents are a symbol of a powerful religious cult. It was called Quetzalcoatl, or the feathered serpent.
The so-called cult of Quetzalcoatl, perhaps a better way to think about it is a political ideology. And of course it had religious overtones. Cult's perhaps the wrong word because it suggests something kind of small scale and extra governmental. This was political ideology, front and center.
To gain admittance into this cult, a local king, like Kiwiks, had to submit to a rigorous initiation.
And the priests would very often sequester the initiate for several days. He would undergo rituals of self-mortification.
Artwork from the time depicted rituals involving bloodletting ceremonies, in which initiates pierced their penises and other body parts.
And that would be a very interesting way to sacrifice yourself. Well, obviously very painful initiation that involved Quetzalcoatl.
At the new palace in Kiwik, George finds signs that in the midst of the boom times, something else seems to go wrong.
We see this big pile of rock up here in front of the building, and it makes really not too much sense at the beginning. You have this beautiful building here on this side with these rooms. You have a set of rooms on the other side, and right in the middle you have a big chunk of rubble. We conclude that what we're looking at is an actual staircase that was built by workers to give them access to the upper stories of the building. Here is a scaffold system being used by the Maya as part of the construction technique. Okay, now it's not gone. The stairway is still here. If the building was finished, they would have removed the stairway. The indications of this scaffolding are is that you're seeing construction happening. You're not seeing a finished building.
Another part of Kiwiik's palace shows similar signs of a sudden halt in construction. The second-story walls of a building are laid out on the ground by masons, but never erected.
All of these characteristics are evidence that the city was in full bloom, that architects were employed, that the king was feeling confident and powerful about what he was doing, that the city was part of a world that was blossoming and expanding, and not this idea of the king being Miss Havisham sitting among a ruined house as things slowly fell apart for him and his world collapsed. This is a very different kind of image for what was going on here.
So what brought Kiwiik's boom times to a screeching halt? At first, war seems an obvious explanation for the stoppage. But an exhaustive search turns up no arrowheads and no spear points. But these people were not running for their lives. The evidence suggests an orderly departure. Pots carefully hung on wall pegs or set to the sides of rooms. They were left intact and only broke later as the abandoned building began to crumble.
But it looks like most of them are right along the edges of the interior, which really looks like they're taking some time to put these vessels somewhere to guard them at the time they're leaving them.
Kind of like making things neat right before you leave the house.
Right, kind of tidying up in some way.
So what could have caused this carefully planned abandonment of Stairway and the abrupt work stoppage at the palace? At Stairway to Heaven, data indicates cisterns would have armed the Maya for 3 months without rain. A few months longer with emergency water rationing. But evidence from core samples suggests this would not have been enough.
We find 8 of these bands that suggests, in fact, that it wasn't just like one massive drought, but it was probably a series of droughts that have durations of about 3 to 20 years. And you know, every time things would get going again, they would get pounded with a fairly long duration drought.
At some point, the droughts overwhelmed Stairway, leaving only one option.
All it would take would be a short period of time in which there is no water in those cisterns, and those people would have to leave that hill. It's simply impossible to live there. The various families, elite families, they were reaching a point where they were having to make a very difficult decision, which was to leave Stairway to Heaven.
They loaded what they could of their lives onto their backs and carefully
What is this National Geographic? These archaeologists and this narrator is completely making up this human, like, history of what actually happened. No fucking penises were fucking pierced. Nothing was fucking, like, these wars and didn't have, like,
designed to respond not only
like,
to
fuck
managing
off.
rainwater,
Fuck you,
but
man.
managing a lack of rainwater too. It's not a surprise they left. What becomes the question for us is why they don't come back.
No, really though, like, these archaeologists, like, this is, like...
So why didn't Stairway's residents and the King of Kiwiik survive these droughts, as they clearly had in the past? The extreme intensity of these droughts was disastrous, making a carefully managed
power beyond the a split or dinner Guangxi province.
lands near Xi'an. What? They reign with making a carefully managed response their only hope. But Bay
cutting his way through the Cambodian jungle in search of exotic insects. Ori Muo suddenly came across the last thing he was expecting, a massive complex of stone temples. Muo had stumbled across one of the world's most astonishing and enduring architectural feats, the 900-year-old remains of Angkor Wat. But who built these vast, sophisticated temples? Why construct them deep in the jungle, only to abandon them? At first, there were no answers. Then, an amazing eyewitness account from the 13th century emerged in China. The author describes the great Temple of Angkor, a fantastic citadel, and its resourceful inhabitants. How could this be true? The evidence was scant. Now science is providing unexpected proof. Archaeologists are applying the latest techniques to reveal the mysteries of Angkor. And radar images from space reveal that Angkor was much bigger than originally imagined. A vast city, the size of London. Scientists now know that Angkor Wat was just a small part of one of the largest and most sophisticated cities in the world. Angkor Wat, one of the world's true enigmas, its size and purpose baffling. Larger than any cathedral, it is truly one of the greatest structures ever built. Its towers, shaped like lotus flowers, were raised 100 years before the Cathedral of Chartres in France. The buildings are laid out on a vast scale, stone shrines ascending one upon the other as if reaching for the heavens. Endless corridors are carved with the longest reliefs in the world. The precise construction would be hard to match even with lasers used by modern surveyors. Archaeologist Charles Hyam has studied all aspects of Angkor and its inhabitants, the Khmer. Professor Hyam has been crucial to understanding the extraordinary history of this ancient culture.
We are standing in the middle of the world's largest religious monument. It's absolutely gigantic. It stretches on and on. Angkor Wat was the temple mausoleum of one of Angkor's greatest kings, King Suryavarman II, the Sun King. And when he died, his ashes would have been placed under the heart of the central lotus tower behind me.
Angkor Wat, meaning Holy Temple, is symbolic in every way. Its vast square moat represents the oceans around Mount Meru, legendary home of the Hindu gods. When Ori Muo stumbled across Angkor in 1860, he wrote, "One of these temples, a rival to that of Solomon and erected by some ancient Michelangelo, might take an honorable place beside our most beautiful buildings. It is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome." The Frenchman suspected that the temples belonged to a huge and sophisticated civilization, but he had no evidence. Angkor Wat lies in the northwest floodplains of Cambodia, just above the Great Lake. When Muo discovered it in 1860, only a handful of Buddhist monks and local villagers lived around the ancient site. None of them knew how Angkor Wat had evolved or who had built it. Legend had it that the Great Temple had built itself. Some said that it had always been there. In Europe, the publication of Muo's journal created a sensation. Soon, a stream of explorers, photographers, and archaeologists travelled east, keen to uncover the mysteries of this vanished world. But Henri Muo's part in this puzzle came to a sudden end. Bitten by a poisonous insect, he died in the jungle a year after discovering the incredible site. As early explorers began to strip away the jungle, they discovered even more temples. The walls of the vast monuments were covered in intricate carvings. These reliefs illustrate legends of an ancient culture and its religion. The sandstone sections were carved in place. They would have taken the artists decades to complete. Inscriptions here are written not only in an ancient Cambodian language, but also, mysteriously, in Sanskrit, the priestly language of the Hindus.
One of the great breakthroughs has been the translation of the entire corpus of Angkorian inscriptions by a French scholar, Georges Sedez, in 7 thick volumes. And so, bit by bit, the actual internal history of Angkor has been unravelled, and that's been absolutely critical.
To the code breakers, they disclosed that for 6 centuries Angkor had been the capital of the Khmer, the indigenous people of Cambodia. Between the 9th and 15th centuries AD, a total of 38 kings ruled their empire from Angkor. Its borders reached from southern Vietnam to Laos, and from the Mekong River to eastern Burma. But whose grand vision was this great city? And why was it built in the middle of the jungle? The deciphering continued. Then an astonishing discovery was made. A junior Chinese official on a diplomatic mission visited Angkor in the summer of 1296 AD. During his year-long visit, Zhou Daguan kept a journal. His diary tells of a major civilization, a capital much bigger and more developed than the archaeologists dared imagine. But was Zhou Daguan's account fact or myth? Archaeologists searched for proof of the existence of the city Zhou described. As they pieced together this gigantic puzzle, the full story began to emerge. For thousands of years, the indigenous people of Cambodia, the Khmer, had cut rice fields from the jungle. These farmers were a largely self-contained and peaceful race. But from the 1st century AD, small feuding kingdoms developed around the country. In the 8th century, a great leader emerged. To find a site for a brand new sacred capital, he abandoned his home city in the eastern part of Cambodia and ordered all his subjects to cross the Mekong River in a great march west. Having conquered his rivals, he chose the lush land between the sacred Kulen Hills and the Great Lake for his new citadel. In 802 AD, he had himself crowned Jayavarman, the supreme world emperor, king of kings. Jayavarman's charisma won the people over. He came not only to rule by divine consent, but to be worshipped as a god himself. At a stroke, this great and charismatic leader changed the course of Cambodian history. Over the next 500 years, Jayavarman's descendants, living gods, succeeded him to reign in Angkor. Each king had his own monument built to his glory, destined to become his mausoleum. Since the 2nd century AD, the Khmers had practiced Hinduism. Each of the royal temples is modelled on the 5 peaks of Mount Meru, the home of the Indian gods. For their builders, the shrines were a celebration of religion, art, science, and power. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, Cambodia was part of France's colonial empire. It was they who led the way in piecing Angkor together.
When they arrived and took colonial control of this part of the world, the place was an absolute shambles. I mean, there were stones just lying around everywhere. It was nothing like what you see today. And so they dedicated vast amount of energy and effort into the reconstruction of the temples.
In the 1960s, the eminent archaeologist Bernard-Philippe Grolier made this comparison of Angkor. Imagine that within the city limits of Paris, you found thrown together Versailles, the Place de la Concorde, and the Louvre. Surrounding these, the cathedrals of Notre Dame, Chartres, and Rheims, flanked by all the churches built in Paris before the 19th century. Since Henri Mouot had first discovered Angkor in 1860, much had been learned about its history. But almost nothing was known about the culture responsible for these incredible monuments. The largest religious monument in the world, the City of the Gods, Angkor Wat in the heart of Cambodia. But is this astonishing temple only the visible tip of a greater, unseen mystery? 700 years ago, a junior Chinese official visited Angkor on a diplomatic mission. During his 11-month stay with a Cambodian family, he recorded many aspects of life in Angkor. But Zhou Daiguan's account contains several flights of fancy. For instance, he describes the great temple of Angkor Wat as having been built in a single day by a legendary Chinese architect. He was also openly judgmental, referring to his hosts as barbarians. Archaeologists have taken his writings with a pinch of salt.
You've always got to think of it as being seen through the eyes of an educated Chinese, for whom anyone beyond the empire was, by definition, a barbarian. And in reading what he has to say, one has to be, certainly on occasion, judicious in realizing the prejudices were there.
For 100 years, French archaeologists were too busy restoring the temples to pay the journal much attention, so it was largely ignored. Then, in the 1970s, the murderous regime of Pol Pot stopped all work at Angkor. His army of communist revolutionaries, the Khmer Rouge, laid thousands of landmines around the site, rendering it off limits for years. Now at last, stability has returned to Cambodia, and work on the temples has resumed. Today, Angkor has World Heritage Site protection, with a dozen countries funding archaeological research. With much of the major restoration work complete, the focus has shifted away from the temples at the center and onto the outlying pieces of the puzzle. Just north of Angkor Wat, an 8-mile wall encloses the remains of several magnificent stone temples. Explorer Henri Mouot suspected in 1860 that this was once the Khmer's great capital of Angkor Thom, the holy city. The perfectly square wall, like Angkor Wat, is surrounded by a moat and covers an area the size of Manhattan Island. At its center is the Bayon Temple. In his journal from 1296, Zhou Daguan describes a busy city teeming with life. Archaeologists are now looking for evidence that this is the great metropolis he was describing. But any evidence has all but vanished under dense forest. In the last 2 years, archaeologist Jacques Gaucher has started to excavate the interior of the walled city.
Quand j'ai commencé cette étude, sur le plan...
When I started this study, we knew almost nothing because everything was covered in forest.
Inexistante. Excepté ce...
The only surviving features were the stone temples and the foundation of a royal palace, but we knew nothing of the rest of the 900 hectares within the city wall.
Inclus à l'intérieur de cette forme.
For a while it seemed that Gaucher was fighting a losing battle, but his persistence is at last producing results.
2 ans après une étude systématique,
After 2 years of very difficult research, we've at last begun to build an impression of this city.
l'histoire de cette ville.
Gaucher is plotting thousands of coordinates onto an ever more detailed map of Angkor Thom. He is now able to trace an intricate grid system of canals and roads, together with the sites of thousands of wooden houses. Back in 1860, when Henri Mouot discovered Angkor Wat, he had suspected that it was just part of a complex city. Zhou Daguan's 13th century journal alludes to a political and religious citadel. Now, at last, archaeologists have enough evidence to bring to life this extraordinary city as it looked 700 years ago. Angkor was a capital far bigger and far in advance of any European city of the time. Jacques Gaucher's findings confirm the accuracy of Zhou Daguan's account. What he describes is fact, not fantasy.
These are the monuments which have caused merchants from overseas to speak so often of Cambodia the rich and noble. If you are looking for gold lions, gold Buddhas, bronze elephants and bronze horses, this is where you'll find them.
From the inscriptions, archaeologists know that Angkor Thom, the holy city, was built nearly a century before Zhou arrived by the Khmer's greatest monarch. Jayavarman VII ruled over Cambodia between 1181 and 1219. Known as the Great Builder King, he expanded the empire further than any other Khmer ruler. Within the city walls, the king built a palace befitting his mighty empire.
The royal palace stands to the north of the Golden Tower. Lintels and columns, all decorated with carved and painted Buddhas, are immense. The roofs too are impressive. Long colonnades and open corridors stretch away, interlaced in harmonious relation.
Jacques Gaucher's excavations at the royal palace confirm Zhou's account.
On a trouvé une série de structures en bois qui étaient en place.
We found evidence that this palace was a large area with interconnecting courtyards and buildings. We found holes 80 centimeters in diameter for huge supporting columns. It would have been a very impressive sight.
As evidence materializes about the royal palace, the role of the Khmer's rulers, these earthly gods, becomes clearer. During his stay, Zhou Daguan had several audiences with the ruling king.
Every time I was admitted to the palace for an audience with the king, he came forward with his chief wife and took his place in the embrasure of the golden window in the main audience hall.
Zhou himself came from a culture with a ruler elevated to godhood. The Chinese approved of the Khmer's devotion.
These people know what is due a king.
The king topped a social pyramid that stretched down to the lowest peasant. The monarch's potency showed itself in a legend Zhou Daguan relates.
Out of the palace rises a golden tower, to the top of which the ruler ascends nightly to sleep. It is common belief that in the tower dwells a genie, formed like a serpent with 9 heads, which is lord of the entire kingdom. Every night, the genie appears in the shape of a woman with whom the sovereign couples. Should the genie fail to appear for a single night, it is a sign that the king's death is at hand. If the king should fail to keep his tryst, disaster is sure to follow.
Well, I'm not sure about that. He would have been a fine king had he been able to do that for any length of time. But what we do know is that it was a practice of the aristocrats to send, and the regional landed gentry, as it were, to send up a woman from their family to be a member of the king's entourage, to become a concubine, which would, in a sense, bind the provinces to the centre in a very physical manner. And it wouldn't be surprising if, indeed, the king did have a very substantial harem from which to choose.
Zhou Daguan notes that the king had 5 wives and a harem of 3,000 women. The king was rarely seen outside the palace, but Zhou describes one such occasion, the New Year festival.
As night comes on, the king is besought to take part in the spectacle. The rockets are fired and the crackers touched off. The rockets can be seen from 13 kilometers away. The firecrackers, large as swivel guns, shake the whole city.
Below the king was an army of bureaucrats graded by rank, as Zhou describes.
In this country, there is a hierarchy of ministers, generals, astronomers, and other functionaries. Beneath these come all sorts of small employees, differing only in name from our own.
These would all have been descendants of families honoured by the original Jayavarman, who had founded Angkor 500 years earlier. What is not clear from Zhou's writings is how many people lived in Angkor. Sanskrit inscriptions in temples such as Ta Prohm offer valuable clues.
We know that the temple housed at least 12,000 people, including a number of great priests, I think over 650 dancers and various other officiants to maintain the temple and to do the necessary temple duties.
If 12,000 people served a single temple, what was the overall population? Jacques Gaucher's new research is not yet complete, but it does support an educated guess.
To give a number, this city could have been between 80,000, 90,000 and 150,000 people.
In the same period, the population of London totaled no more than 30,000. So, discoveries are confirming that what Henri Mouot suspected, and Zhou Daguan alleges, is correct. Angkor Thom was indeed a large, well-structured city with a huge population. Now suspicions are aroused that the jungle conceals an altogether bigger surprise. A metropolis so vast that its full extent can only be detected from space. The search for the hidden empire of Angkor was about to take an unexpected turn. In 1994, archaeologists persuaded NASA to undertake a unique task. The space agency had developed specialist radar to penetrate vegetation. Their challenge was to probe the area of Angkor in Cambodia as the Space Shuttle Endeavour passed over Southeast Asia. The resulting images cover an area 100 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide. For the first time, scientists have an accurate impression of the wider city's infrastructure 1,000 years ago. Covering an area the size of London, this rural metropolis was immense. For archaeologist Elizabeth Moore, this is a major breakthrough.
I'm sure they had the skill to do it.
It is revolutionizing understanding of the size of the kingdom.
Forced water up.
And at first people said, well, you won't find anything new at Angkor, but we have. And what the radar has shown us is just how all the regions contributed to what then became the central zone of Angkor.
The radar pictures also reveal previously unknown temples all over the Angkorian basin, as well as an intricate network of roads and canals, all leading to the walled city. Evident for the first time is the grid plan of this once great metropolis.
When you start looking at the radar imagery and you see the sophistication with which they were able to control and alter their terrain, I've never seen a culture like it elsewhere in Southeast Asia in terms of manipulating the landscape, of using it to their benefit.
Now, the challenge for archaeologists was to work out at ground level what had been photographed from space. Archaeologist Christophe Potier is using the images as a route map to trace the layout of ancient Angkor. The newly discovered temples were at the center of their own communities. Just like village churches in Europe, they indicate the size of each settlement, showing the true extent of the metropolis. Today, Potier and his Cambodian assistant, Sin Chenda, attempt to locate a number of previously unrecorded ruins outside the walled city of Angkor Thom.
Wow, super. It's a quite nice one. It seems to be a Garuda. You can see very clearly the Garuda with his wings is like an eagle, and quite interesting. Unfortunately, it has been badly damaged, but it's nice. And compared to the style, it could be a late 9th century, maybe first part of the 10th.
Temples like this would have been the centers of villages housing between 100 and 300 people. Potier and his colleagues have established that the number of temple sites like this in the region runs into thousands, suggesting a massive population. There was a direct relationship between these villages and the royal capital. An ancient inscription persuades archaeologists like Charles Hyam of the link.
We know that at least 80,000 or so people from 3,000 villages were assigned to supply all the goods that we needed annually to maintain it in a good condition.
Vast amounts of produce and thousands of people would have been transported from the villages. A complex network of roads leading to the center is evident from the NASA pictures. The inscriptions point to the great builder king, Jayavarman.
Jayavarman VII was a fantastic builder. Across his whole kingdom, he had roads constructed. He was a great man for infrastructure, one reason being that he wanted pilgrims to go and visit his places. And so he had rest houses built at one day's journey apart. He moved and shaped more stone than every other Angkorian king combined. And he must go down in world history as one of the great builders of all time.
If all the outlying temples were connected in one giant conurbation, then Angkor can be acknowledged as a rural metropolis, as big as modern-day London. At its heart, a walled royal enclave the size of Westminster.
There are hundreds, let's say thousands of that kind of small sanctuaries spread all around the area of Angkor, but the large area of Angkor. And it's that show, obviously, when there was village everywhere, almost everywhere.
Early research suggests that this metropolis could have had a population of 1 million people. This would make Angkor, at its peak, between the 11th and 13th centuries, one of the largest cities in the world. The indigenous Cambodians, the Khmer, were powerful and successful. They managed to build one of the most extraordinary cities in history in one of the world's most hostile climates. But how was such a large population able to survive and prosper in the heart of an inhospitable jungle? The answer lies in the Khmer's ability to harness their most precious asset. Cambodia has 8 months without rain, when rivers become a muddy trickle. Then, for a few months, the monsoon brings floods. For this reason, Angkor is built close to the Great Lake, which swells to 4 times its size in the rainy season. It not only provided precious water throughout the year, but also an inexhaustible supply of fish. Zhou Daguan records,
Of all the fish, the black carp is the most abundant. Next in number, the tench and freshwater congers. The prawns of Channan weigh as much as half a kilo apiece. Crocodiles there are as large as boats.
Apart from fish, the staple diet, like most of Asia, was rice. Paddy fields need a plentiful supply of water to ensure a healthy crop. When the founding ruler Jayavarman arrived at Angkor, there were already peasant farmers cultivating ancient rice fields. But from the 9th to the 13th centuries, successive god kings ordered thousands more acres of jungle to be cleared for rice production. Water had to be cleverly harnessed to irrigate the new fields. If the system failed, the very survival of the kingdom would be at stake. Well-maintained canals were also crucial to Angkor. Every day, tons of heavy stones for the construction of temples would be transported by canal from the Kulen Hills, 50 kilometers away. Planning expert Jacques Gaucher believes the success of Angkor is due to the elaborate system of interconnecting waterways.
You have tanks or ponds which are dug to keep also this water, and you have some canalization. This royal palace is full of small canalization. The city is full of channels, and the outside, the territory, is also full of big channels. These systems, which are at different level of scale, they must have been connected to each other.
It was the Khmer's ability to harness water that made them unique. While the Dutch were experimenting with their first canals, the Khmer were already past masters. The most recent excavation by Jacques Gaucher reveals the complexity of Khmer water management within the royal city. His surveys have uncovered 2 huge reservoirs, each measuring 300 meters long and 20 meters wide. A major road intersected them. water needed to flow around the city. What Gaucher wanted to know was how the road could be used while water still flowed from one reservoir to the other. So he began to dig. The excavation unearthed a stone dike where the road and reservoirs met. It also shows that the reservoirs were built on slightly different levels. Beneath the surface of the road, narrow channels in the dike allow water to filter from the upper reservoir into the lower. But the arrangement may have been too finely balanced.
Playing at such a scale with the management of water, with such small differences of level, I think the system was quite fragile. And if there were any variability in the environment or in the maintenance of the city, for social problems or political ones, I think the precision, I mean the ultra sophistication can have been a weakness in the system in a way.
This complex system provided water throughout the royal city for drinking, cooking, and even bathing.
Cambodia is an excessively hot country, and it is impossible to get through the day without bathing several times. There are no bathhouses, no basins. However, every family has a pond, or several families have one in common. Men and women go naked into this pond.
The construction of extensive water systems and great stone temples in the jungle demanded colossal manpower. Why would the Khmer be prepared to devote so much of their year toiling in the king's name?
Why was it that the peasantry out there in the fields contributed so much labour, willingly it seems, to the maintenance of the centre? And the answer may well be that they really believed that the king was a god, and they were working in the service of the deity, and this kept them going.
Oh, I think without a doubt, I fully agree with you. You couldn't have built the city of Angkor without that kind of firm belief.
But although the Khmer people dedicated enormous effort into constructing their great city, it was the addition of slave labor that made it possible. Zhou describes these unfortunates.
Wild men from the hills can be bought to serve as slaves. Families of wealth may own more than 100. Those of lesser means content themselves with 10 or 20. Only the very poor have none.
We know, too, again from the inscriptions, that some of them had a very raw deal. There was one who tried to escape from the land in which he was born and was assigned, and they found him and they brought him back and they gouged his eyes out and cut off his ears.
Punishment was severe for all subjects of Angkor, noted the Chinese diplomat.
In very serious cases, a ditch is dug outside the city. The criminal is dropped into it. Earth and stones are heaped on top until he is buried alive. Lesser crimes are dealt with by cutting off feet or hands, or by amputating the nose.
The economy of Angkor was based on international trade. The Khmers produced food for their swelling population, but there was a surplus for trade with neighboring states. They wove fine cloth, cast huge bronze statues, and exported ivory, kingfisher feathers, beeswax, and scented wood. Their main trading partner was China.
The reliefs of the Bayonne reveal a Chinese trade junk coming across the waters of the Great Lake just south of Angkor. And we know that there was indeed a great deal of trade going on because of the more recent archaeological research that has been excavating in the royal palace, and there they've been unearthing a considerable quantity of Chinese ceramics.
Zhou Daguan's delegation were not the only Chinese in Angkor. In fact, Chinese settlers had been there for years.
The Chinese always take a wife here as soon as they arrive, deriving additional benefit from the woman's business skills. In Cambodia, it is the women who take charge of trade. There are no shops in which the merchants live. Instead, they display their goods on matting spread on the ground.
Women held positions of power and authority. They owned property, engaged in trade, and even served as bodyguards to the king. But the Chinese interest in Cambodian women was not driven solely by trade.
Everyone with whom I talked said that the Cambodian women are highly sexed. 1 or 2 days after giving birth to a child, they are ready for intercourse. If a husband is not responsive, he will be discarded.
By the end of the 13th century, Angkor was at its peak. A succession of god kings had built this beautiful and astonishing city. A sophisticated water system made the city work, fed its people, and created wealth. But then, at its very peak, cracks in the system began to appear. Cracks that would lead to the city being abandoned to the jungle. It took nearly 500 years for Angkor to grow to the vast city that the Chinese diplomat Zhou Daguan described in 1296. Yet just a century later, the city lay deserted, given up to the jungle. But why? Throughout history, there are few examples of cities being totally abandoned. One key factor is known. Throughout Angkor's history, the Khmer had waged war with their neighbors. In the early years of Angkor, the Vietnamese Chams were the Khmer's sworn enemies. Most of the temple walls around the capital depict epic battles against the Chams. But by the time of Zhou Daguan's visit, the main threat came from the emerging Thai kingdom of Siam as it expanded into Cambodia. He recounts.
Recently, during the war with Siam, whole villages have been laid waste.
In the diplomat's eyes, the Khmer army was ill-prepared for war.
Soldiers move about unclothed and barefoot. In the right hand is carried a lance, in the left a shield. They have no bows, no missiles, no breastplates, and no helmets. Generally speaking, these people have neither discipline nor strategy.
Inscriptions show that in 1431, the Thais sacked Angkor. They looted everything possible, enslaving much of the population, including the king's entire harem, and carried them off to Thailand. Abandoned, the city of Angkor was slowly reabsorbed into the jungle from which it had emerged 5 centuries before. Henri Mouot wrote in 1860, "One must ask, what has become of this powerful race, so civilized and enlightened to create these gigantic works?" The conventional explanation is that the empire's rulers lost their grip on power, and the Thais simply scared them off. But the mystery of Angkor takes another twist. Today, archaeologists believe that there were other factors at work. Charles Hyam points to the great builder king, Jayavarman VII.
Perhaps because of the excesses of Jayavarman VII, who clearly was a builder with a frenzy of activity. And he may well, it's said, and it might be true, that he exhausted the resources of the state and it went into a decline.
Jayavarman VII was the first Buddhist king after several hundred years of Hindu worship. This more compassionate religion may have given the Khmer cause to reflect on the excesses of their kings.
And I wonder whether, in fact, the slow decline that may well have set in was the result of a lack of belief out in the fields there that the king was, in fact, a deity, and that this vital link between the two began to fray.
Jacques Gaucher theorizes that while the Khmer's success can be attributed to the harnessing of water, it could also have led to their undoing. Such was the fine balance of nature that if irrigation and the storage of water were not kept up, they could easily fall into disrepair.
Le système à ce moment-là devient fragile et on voit très bien.
The water system was very fragile because it was so sophisticated. And the problem is, if it's not well maintained, it could easily become blocked by sediment.
The kings who came after Jayavarman VII were less interested in grand building plans. It's also possible they stopped maintaining the intricate water system. Deforestation was also a likely contributor. So much jungle had been cut back for rice growing that undoubtedly the rivers and canals would have silted up, which in turn would have led to an ecological disaster for the Khmer. Christophe Potier believes the clues are obvious.
The pound is very clear there with the water. At the end of Angkor, it's pieces of the forest should have been very, very rare. So deforestation is not a new problem. It's an old one.
It is most likely that it was a combination of these factors that led the Khmer to abandon their once great city. What remained of the Khmer court re-established itself on the banks of the Mekong, near Cambodia's present-day capital of Phnom Penh.
We're not talking about the actual collapse and total demise of a civilization. What happened was that they moved sensibly to the east, down to the Mekong River, and away from the Thais.
Now completely Buddhist, renouncing material wealth, the Khmer would never again embrace the lofty heights they had in Angkor. For 400 years, Angkor lay derelict and forgotten until its rediscovery by Henri Mouot in 1860. Today, Angkor is recognized as a wonder of the world. In Cambodia's new era of stability, archaeologists from around the world continue to make fresh discoveries. At last, a world lost to the jungle is re-emerging. A major metropolis that for over half a millennium dominated a thriving empire. One of the greatest cities the world has ever known.
Toggerland.
So I wouldn't call this a highlight video, although I love the backbreaker.
Hi, this is Brian Forster of HiddenIncaTours.com, and today we're exploring Tula, which is a site outside of Mexico City. Tula rose in between the fall of Teotihuacan and the rise of Tenochtitlan, which was the Aztec capital. And Tula is most famous for what are called the Atlantean warriors. So that is more or less what this video is going to focus on. But we're also going to see possible evidence of lost ancient high technology, or at least megalithic construction, such as this pile of very large basalt slabs you see on the left-hand side of the screen. Now we're going up to see some carving that was done during Toltec times. See, the red pigment is the original work, and the grayer stone is more recent restoration. And this is the main structure, or so-called temple. Notice it's relatively crude construction out of volcanic stone, with volcanic ash used as a type of mortar. And of course, this site has been heavily restored in more recent times. So, in front, what we're looking at is another part of the complex. But now, what we're looking at is some square pillars. Notice again, very rough construction with a sort of covering made out of probably volcanic ash or other material. And now we're going up the staircase. The important thing to look at the stairs is you will see uneven construction. You see very nicely cut slabs of stone and then much rougher pieces put in. This, of course, again, was restored in modern times, but it's the difference between the beautifully flat surfaces and the other broken pieces, which I find quite fascinating. But the main feature are the so-called Atlantean warriors. And these, thought by some, being held in the hands as being a weapon, like a laser or something. That's what some UFO authors believe. However, there's a more pragmatic explanation which we were taught by local people. And that's that in the left hand are held short arrows, and the right hand is a kind of small crossbow made out of wood and probably rubber. And at the top you see the headdress. Here in the back, square columns. Again, the surfaces are very well done with rough surface carving. So is it possible that Tula is much, much older and was simply adopted by the Toltec people who reconstructed it? Once again, the so-called laser weapons in the right hand, and what the headdresses represent at the top are feathers, and then below that a band around the warrior's head. So again, a local expert told us that these are not Atlantean warriors, but in fact warriors of the god Quetzalcoatl. That's why it's important to get local information rather than necessarily works by authors from foreign countries, so of course it's all important to look at. The idea that these are Atlantean warriors is an idea that was formulated in the 18th or 19th century by a foreign author, but the name has stuck to this very day. And here you can see the landscape around Tula. There is a ball court in the background, which of course the Maya and Olmec people had. And it is a relatively small site. It's nothing in comparison to Teotihuacan, which is the huge complex with the Sun Temple, the Moon Temple, or pyramid so-called, and also temple or pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. But if you're in this part of Mexico, it's well worth visiting. The stone is basalt, some of it is restoration, and our local guide told us that the quarry is probably 25 kilometers away. So that's quite a distance to move these relatively large pieces of stone, but not insurmountable by ancient people. Here again, you see other pyramidal structures in the area. And this is video 3 of a 10-part series filmed in Mexico in February of 2019. If you have not, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and share this video and my 1,000 plus others. And finally, we're walking through at the bottom of this structure again. You see the stucco that was applied to the exterior to make all the surfaces smooth originally. It is possible that the entire so-called temple was covered in that as well. And here, a little anomaly. Again, very finely cut and shaped basalt slabs recycled into possibly a small pool or well. You can learn a lot more in my book, Lost Ancient Technology of Mexico, at Amazon.com.
Again, welcome to the one other very beautiful, energetic, powerful place. The name of this place is Amaru. Amaru is a Aymara language. The snake. Muru, the head. La cabeza, la corona. But the other ancient name possible, more ancient to Aymara, it's possible Pukina, Wilka Uta. Wilka secret, Uta door. Puerta Sagrada.
Yo, I'm still going underneath your 6 after this. Yo, thanks, buddy. Hey, man, I can't believe you're still here. As in, like, here, as in my chat. I don't mean that. I'm glad you're here, buddy. But you know what I mean. Yeah. Well, the first half hour, I was just like, you know, vaping and like eating food and drinking coffee. Yeah, buddy. I'm just about to sign off, man. Oh man, I put put on some weight though. I put on some weight around the belly. I'm trying to. I rode the bike for like 15, 20 minutes. That belly fat, I don't know. It just came out of nowhere. Yeah, I'm actually just about to sign off, man. Are you ready for the unhorde, buddy? Doggers just came online too. GG, yo, thanks, buddy. Thanks, man. Yo, dude, I made a yo-yo video of my trip to that granite rock. That's all diet, yeah. I've cut out my sugars. Yo, I made a yo-yo video. I don't know if you want to see it, but... Oops. This is 4 minutes of nature now with the water. Thanks for watching that, man. I appreciate that, homie. I don't mean to force anyone to watch anything. Okay, man, I gotta go, though, dude. I gotta go. Thanks for being here, man. Yeah, let's do it. Let's raid Dogger. Let's do it. Whoops. Yo, Dick, check out this video that's coming out. We're raiding Dogger now, but check this out. Look at this. There's a there's a video coming out called Doggerland about Dogger. Premieres in 20 hours. It's jokes, man. What's the title? The title is The European Atlantis. Ooh, that's interesting. Look, 33 people like it already. It hasn't even premiered yet. I'll like it, why not? Just can't do that. That's not objectively true. I have to watch it first. Okay. Thank you, Dick. You're the man, dude. 2 hours, yeah. It's crazy. Thanks, man. Catch you later, man. Have a good weekend, and hope everything's good, homie. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making the stream for me. Appreciate it.